"A faux Norman keep," he boomed when I finished, striking a theatrical pose. "Integrated with a functional chimney, as architectural camouflage against bureaucratic tyranny. Brilliant! The juxtaposition, the sheer unmitigated audacity. Forget King Lear, Arthur, my boy. This is high drama." "So, you can do it?" I asked hopefully. "Make it look reasonably like stone? And, not fall off the roof?" "Do it?" Mel scoffed, flourishing a tape measure like a conductor's baton. "Darling, we shall craft a masterpiece, a monument to defiance. We'll use high-density foam carved with the texture of ancient stones, painted with layers of faux aging. Fiberglass crenellations for that authentic, repel the invaders look. Lightweight, weather-resistant, structurally sound, within reason, of course, and utterly, magnificently incongruous. Abernathy won't know what hit him." The letter arrived on official HOA letterhead. Thick cream paper that probably cost more than the alleged infraction itself. It bore the authoritative signature of one Mr. Reginald Abernathy, head of the Architectural Review Committee for the idyllically named, and rigidly controlled, community of Maple Creek Estates. I unfolded it with a sense of mild dread. Usually these missives concerned the precise shade of beige permitted for mailbox posts or the unacceptable angle of a garden gnome. This time, however, the subject was my chimney. Specifically, violation Arc 11B, C, chimney protrusion. According to the meticulously detailed document, complete with an unflattering photograph of my roofline, my chimney, a perfectly functional, recently repaired brick chimney, was guilty of a heinous crime. It exceeds the maximum allowable roofline protrusion, the letter declared gravely, by a measured 4.75 inches as per Guideline 11B, Appendix C, Paragraph 7. 4.75 inches. I read it again. 4 3/4 inches. Less than the length of my hand. Are you kidding me? Did Abernathy personally scale my roof with a laser measure and a spirit level? Did he employ satellite imaging? Perhaps highly trained architectural surveillance squirrels? Unbelievable, I muttered, sinking into a kitchen chair. They're citing me for less than 5 inches on a 30-foot roof. My wife, Gwen, peered over my shoulder. What is it this time? Is the recycling bin visible from the street again? Worse, I said grimly. The chimney. It's too tall. Too tall? She frowned. We just had it repaired after that windstorm last fall. Didn't the mason fix it properly? Oh, he fixed it properly, I grumbled. He probably made it slightly taller than the original for better draft, like a good mason would. He just wasn't aware he needed to consult Appendix C, Paragraph 7 of Abernathy's sacred texts. Now, our chimney wasn't some towering monstrosity. It was a standard brick chimney on a standard 2-story suburban house. It vented our fireplace, which we used maybe 5 times a year. To the casual observer, that is, anyone not armed with architectural bylaws and a measuring tape, it looked completely normal. But not to Reginald Abernathy. To him, those extra 4 3/4 inches were apparently a glaring offense against the carefully curated aesthetic mediocrity of Maple Creek Estates. Reason, I thought, must prevail. Surely a quick chat with Abernathy would clear this up. I scheduled a meeting, hoping to appeal to common sense. That was my first mistake. Mr. Abernathy received me in the HOA clubhouse meeting room, a soulless space decorated in 50 shades of beige. He wore a tweed sport coat, despite it being 75 degrees outside, and peered at me over his spectacles like I was a particularly troublesome fungus he'd found growing on the community petunias. Arthur, he began, steepling his fingers, thank you for coming in. Regarding violation Arc 11B, C. Mr. Abernathy, I interrupted, trying to keep my tone reasonable. It's about the chimney, right? Look, we had it repaired after storm damage. The mason did a great job. Maybe made it a hair taller for better function. We're talking less than 5 inches here. No one would ever notice. Lowering it now would cost thousands, potentially damage the roof flashing. And for what? Abernathy adjusted his spectacles. Arthur, he said slowly, as if explaining quantum physics to a toddler, the architectural guidelines exist for a reason. They ensure harmony, cohesion. They protect the aesthetic integrity and thus the property values of our community. Your chimney, in its current state, is incongruous. It disrupts the intended roofline profile. It is, frankly, aesthetically jarring. Aesthetically jarring? My chimney? Mr. Abernathy, I pleaded, it's a functional chimney. It needs to be a certain height to draw properly. This isn't just decorative. Function must yield to form in matters of community aesthetics, he sniffed. The guidelines are quite clear. Compliance is mandatory. You have 30 days to submit plans for rectification prepared by a licensed contractor. Failure to comply will result in daily fines. He slid a copy of the violation notice back across the table. Meeting adjourned. I walked out of that beige room fuming. Rectification? Fines? Over 4 3/4 inches? This wasn't about harmony. It was about power. It was about Abernathy, the petty tyrant of the rooflines, wielding his clipboard like a scepter. I am not shortening that chimney, I declared that evening, pacing the living room. Gwen sighed and muted the TV. Lance, my best friend and neighbor, who thankfully lived outside Abernathy's jurisdiction, leaned forward on the couch, grinning. So King Reginald decreed the royal chimney is too tall? Lance chuckled. He called it aesthetically jarring, I fumed, and incongruous. He wants plans, contractors, thousands of dollars over less than 5 inches. Oh, honey, just get a quote, Gwen said wearily. Maybe it won't be that bad. It's not worth fighting the HOA. You know how they are. No, I insisted, stopping my pacing. It's the principle of the thing, Gwen. It's extortion by tape measure. It's architectural fascism. I threw my hands up in exasperation. If he thinks my chimney is too visible, too tall, too jarring? Lance stroked his chin, a mischievous glint in his eye. Yeah, what does he expect you to do? Build a giant decorative box around it to hide it? Like disguise it as I don't know, a castle keep protecting the royal chimney? He meant it as a joke. I saw Gwen roll her eyes. But something clicked in my brain. A box? No, but a keep, a castle. I stopped pacing. An idea, truly terrible, magnificently absurd, began to take shape. If the chimney alone was the problem, if its stark, vertical incongruity was so offensive to Abernathy's delicate sensibilities, what if it wasn't alone? What if it was merely one part of a much larger, much more intentionally incongruous structure? Lance, I said slowly, my voice hushed with dawning inspiration, you absolute genius. Gwen groaned. Oh no, Arthur, don't! What are you thinking? I ignored her, grabbing a napkin and a pen from the coffee table. Not just a box, I muttered, sketching frantically. A keep! A proper medieval keep, stone walls, battlements. The chimney becomes the central tower. Yes, Lance cheered, leaning over my shoulder. Totally. You could add arrow slits, maybe a little flag on top. Arthur, Gwen cried, snatching the napkin. The drawing depicted our modest, split-level suburban ranch house with a miniature, crenellated stone tower inexplicably grafted onto the roof, engulfing the chimney. You cannot be serious. A castle attached to our house? The neighbors will have us committed. Abernathy will literally explode. Let him, I declared, snatching the napkin back. He wants harmony? He wants blending in? Fine. My chimney will blend right into its own damn medieval fortress. He thinks 4 inches is jarring? Let's see how he likes 4 tons of faux Norman architecture. Gwen put her head in her hands. Lance was practically bouncing with excitement. "Dude, you gotta do it! It's the ultimate HOA clapback!" The idea consumed me. I spent the next few days obsessively researching medieval keeps, mostly via image searches, and, more importantly, theatrical set design and prop construction. This couldn't be real stone, obviously. It needed to be lightweight, relatively easy to install, and crucially, potentially removable if things went completely sideways legally, yet convincing enough from the street to cause maximum confusion and annoyance. Foam? Fiberglass? I needed an expert in architectural illusion. My search led me to Mel's Majestic Props and Scenery, a cluttered workshop on the outskirts of town filled with half-finished parade floats, giant papier-mâché heads, and props from countless local theater productions. Mel himself was everything I'd hoped for. Flamboyant, eccentric, with a dramatic silver goatee and a tendency to wear a velvet ascot even while operating power tools. I nervously explained my situation. The HOA, Abernathy, the 4 3/4-inch problem, my vision of a chimney-disguising castle keep. Mel listened intently, his eyes gleaming with artistic fervor. "A faux Norman keep," he boomed when I finished, striking a theatrical pose. "Integrated with a functional chimney, as architectural camouflage against bureaucratic tyranny. Brilliant. The juxtaposition, the sheer unmitigated audacity. Forget King Lear, Arthur, my boy, this is high drama." "So, you can do it?" I asked hopefully. "Make it look reasonably like stone and, not fall off the roof." "Do it?" Mel scoffed, flourishing a tape measure like a conductor's baton. "Darling, we shall craft a masterpiece. A monument to defiance. We'll use high-density foam carved with the texture of ancient stones, painted with layers of faux aging. Fiberglass crenellations for that authentic, repel the invaders look. Lightweight, weather-resistant, structurally sound, within reason, of course, and utterly, magnificently incongruous. Abernathy won't know what hit him." Gwen remained horrified, but I was committed. Mel quoted a price that was significantly less than shortening the chimney, but still made my eyes water slightly. He and his small crew of equally theatrical artisans started work the following week. First came the scaffolding, enveloping one side of my house and roof like an industrial spider web. Then Mel's crew arrived, armed with giant blocks of foam, hot wire cutters, carving tools, and buckets of specialized paint. Large, vaguely stone-shaped panels began to take shape in my driveway. The neighborhood was instantly abuzz. What was Arthur building? Was it an addition? A very strange dormer? Why was it made of foam? Mr. Abernathy appeared on day 2, clipboard at the ready, his expression thunderous. "Arthur!" he barked, striding onto my lawn, avoiding the foam dust. "What is the meaning of this structure? I see no permit application for such a significant alteration." I ambled over, trying to look nonchalant. "Oh, this? Just some decorative chimney work, Mr. Abernathy, trying to address your concerns about its protrusion. Thought I'd give it a more substantial, historically inspired shroud, Help it blend in." Mel, never missing a cue, swept over dramatically. "Indeed, sir, we are merely applying architectural camouflage, enhancing the existing structure's visual integration through historically resonant cladding." Abernathy stared, dumbfounded, as one of Mel's crew hoisted a newly carved foam battlement towards the roofline. "That looks suspiciously like a battlement," he sputtered. "This is entirely out of keeping with the approved colonial craftsman vernacular of Maple Creek Estates. I demand you cease this unauthorized construction immediately." "On what grounds, Mr. Abernathy?" I asked politely. "Are faux stone chimney shrouds specifically prohibited in Appendix C?" He glared, speechless for a moment, then spun on his heel and marched away, muttering about emergency board meetings and injunctions. The work continued. Slowly, painstakingly, the castle keep took shape around my chimney. Foam stones were glued, carved, and painted with surprising realism. Crenellations were attached. Narrow, arrow-slit windows were added for effect. The chimney itself was cleverly integrated, becoming the keep's central tower. By the end of the week, the transformation was complete. My ordinary suburban house now sported a miniature, yet remarkably convincing medieval stone keep seemingly fused to its roofline. It was glorious. It was absurd. It was perfect. Gwen refused to come out the front door for 3 days. Lance brought over a 6-pack and a lawn chair just to sit and admire it, cackling periodically. The neighborhood reactions ranged from bewildered amusement to outright horror. Abernathy was reportedly seen pacing in front of my house at odd hours, muttering to himself. But as I stood back, admiring Mel's handiwork, I felt something was missing. The keep looked great, but it felt static. It needed life. It needed drama. "Mel," I said during his final inspection visit, "it's magnificent. But how do we take it to the next level, make it look less like a prop and more like a brooding medieval outpost?" Mel's eyes lit up. "Atmosphere, my boy. Every brooding castle needs a wisp of mysterious smoke curling from its battlements, a hint of hearth fire within. I have just the thing." He returned the next day with a compact, weatherproofed theatrical smoke machine and a remote control. "Standard glycol Faux 3000, he announced proudly. "We'll mount it discreetly near the top, vent it subtly near the chimney flue. A mere puff now and then. Creates incredible ambiance, especially at dusk." We installed the Faux 3000, running a discreet wire down to a waterproof junction box. I waited impatiently for the right conditions. A cool, slightly damp evening, just as twilight settled over Maple Creek Estates. The stage was set. I stood across the street with Lance, remote control clutched in my hand. "Ready?" I whispered. "Oh, I was born ready," Lance breathed, practically vibrating with anticipation. I pressed the button. A moment later, a thick, white, surprisingly voluminous plume of smoke began to billow from the top of my castle tower. It caught the evening light, swirled dramatically around the battlements, and drifted lazily into the suburban sky. It looked amazing, and incredibly alarming if you didn't know it was fake. Within minutes, the first siren wailed in the distance. Then another. Neighbors emerged from their houses, pointing, phones out. Someone shouted, "Arthur's house is on fire!" 2 fire engines, sirens screaming, roared down our quiet street and screeched to a halt in front of my house. Firefighters leapt out, hoses at the ready, staring up in utter confusion at the smoking castle keep. "What in the—" I heard the fire captain mutter into his radio. Before they could douse my creation in foam, Officer Peterson arrived, lights flashing. He looked at the fire trucks, at the smoking castle, at me standing across the street holding a remote control. His face was a mask of profound weariness. "Mr. Miller," he sighed, walking towards me, "please tell me your castle, chimney, house thing is not actually on fire." "Fire, officer?" I said, quickly switching off the smoke machine with the remote. The plume began to dissipate. "Heavens no, just a bit of atmospheric effect. Theatrical smoke. Adds to the realism, don't you think?" Peterson stared at the now smoke-free keep, then back at me. "Theatrical smoke," he repeated flatly. "You generated enough theatrical smoke from your roof castle to warrant a 2-alarm fire response?" Maybe the calibration was a bit high," I offered weakly. The firefighters, realizing it was a false alarm caused by weaponized stagecraft, packed up their gear, looking distinctly unamused. Officer Peterson took copious notes, muttering about public nuisance ordinances and misuse of emergency services. The smoke incident, naturally, brought a fresh wave of official scrutiny. City code enforcement officers paid a visit, armed with clipboards and skeptical expressions. They questioned the structural integrity of the foam keep, the lack of permits for the addition, potential violations of setback rules, and now air quality regulations regarding the unauthorized emission of particulate matter. Theatrical. My castle was officially under siege. The final battle took place, fittingly, within the beige walls of the HOA clubhouse. An emergency meeting of the Architectural Review Committee, and half the neighborhood, it seemed, was convened to determine the fate of the Maple Creek Keep, as someone had inevitably nicknamed it. Mr. Abernathy, armed with his binder, photos of the smoking keep, printouts of angry emails, and an air of vindicated outrage, presented the case for the prosecution. He called the keep an unaesthetic, historically inaccurate, structurally dubious, and potentially hazardous monstrosity. He argued it lowered property values, violated the spirit, if not the exact letter, of numerous bylaws, and made a mockery of the community's carefully crafted image. He demanded its immediate and unconditional removal. Then it was my turn. I stood before the committee, flanked by Gwen, who looked like she was attending my execution, and Lance, who looked like he was attending a rock concert. Mel had even shown up, wearing his velvet ascot for moral support. "Mr. Abernathy, members of the committee, neighbors," I began, trying to sound reasonable yet firm. "Let's not forget how this started. It started with a notice about 4 3/4 inches, a demand for costly, unnecessary modifications to a perfectly functional chimney." I laid out my defense. The keep wasn't an addition. It was a solution. "You found my chimney incongruous," I argued, looking directly at Abernathy. "So I integrated it. I camouflaged it within a larger architectural feature. Is it conventional? No. Is it boring? Absolutely not. It adds character, whimsy, a talking point." I downplayed the structure itself. It's mostly foam, practically elaborate siding, and the smoke, a minor, temporary atmospheric effect, which I voluntarily agreed to cease. I argued that since the bylaws didn't specifically forbid faux Norman castle keeps as chimney shrouds, the structure was technically compliant. Lance even presented a small, hastily gathered petition signed by about 15 neighbors, mostly amused teenagers and people who disliked Abernathy, supporting the keep's right to exist. Mel offered a passionate, if slightly rambling defense of the keep's artistic merit and thematic resonance. The committee was flummoxed. Abernathy was practically vibrating. Residents argued back and forth. Some found it appalling, others hilarious. The bylaws were consulted, debated, and found wanting in the face of such specific absurdity. Finally, after much deliberation, a decision was reached, a classic suburban compromise. The keep could stay, however. I would need to obtain retroactive permits for the structure, a bureaucratic nightmare I knew Mel would relish navigating. The smoke machine was strictly forbidden, except, perhaps, for a brief, pre-approved window on Halloween. And I had to agree to plant some appropriate foundation shrubbery, likely fast-growing Leyland cypress, to soften the visual impact of the keep's base. Abernathy looked like he'd swallowed a lemon, but the motion passed. My castle had survived the siege, so now it stands. A foam and fiberglass medieval keep inexplicably attached to my split-level ranch, the chimney proudly serving as its central tower. The arborvitae are slowly growing in, attempting to soften its glorious absurdity. Gwen still shakes her head whenever she pulls into the driveway, but sometimes I catch a hint of a smile. Lance brings visitors by on weekends. Occasionally, usually when I'm mowing the lawn, Mr. Abernathy walks by on the sidewalk. He never looks directly at the keep, staring straight ahead, his jaw tight. I always make sure to give him a big, friendly, neighborly wave. My chimney might still be 4.75 inches too tall, according to Appendix C, but nobody notices anymore. They're too busy staring at the castle.